welcome to Dokupied. I know it's been a while, but I'm your host, Brandon, otherwise known as DocPay, and this is a podcast that talks about anime, manga, light novels, all things industry related, maybe other stuff, kind of depends, but I'm back making episodes again. It's been over 3 years, and I don't know if you had a chance to listen to my 2020 update that I put out a little while ago, just reviewing what the new format's going to be and what I'm going to talk about in each episode. Things are going to be a little different than they were. A lot has changed over the course of 3 years. I can't believe it's been that long, but I've always been thinking about the show and kind of that whole time wanting to make more episodes, but I wanted the content to be more evergreen, something that people can go back and listen to, something that new listeners can jump back and they won't feel like they've wasted their time, like they don't get what's going on or that the news is outdated. Not necessarily news, but that the content is outdated. So that's what I wanted. I wanted there to be more use for older episodes. And of course, I also want the show and listeners to be able to pick up on the most recent episode and just jump right in. So, with that in mind, the new format is going to generally be, I'm going to start each episode with news, like a roundup of what's happened since the last one. Now, I can't obviously cover everything, and there's dedicated sites out there with news content, but I'm going to review some of the bigger happenings that either I heard about, I read about, I saw, I experienced, whatever. And that's going to be the first half. Second half of the show is going to be kind of a recommendation or discussion or review section. I intend to recommend or go over at least one either light novel or manga every time. This time, I'm actually going to talk about two, so you can look forward to that. One light novel, one manga. Maybe I'll do, depending on when it is, I can do a final wrap-up discussion on whatever the most recent anime season was. I'm not going to talk about every show. I'm not going to talk about a couple episodes at a time like I was doing. I don't think that type of content works well in this format for me personally. So instead, I'd rather talk about like the one show that really surprised me, or here's my dark horse shows of the season, things like that. I'd rather focus on when the show is over. I talk about something as a whole that start to finish is going to be worth your time, no matter when you listen to this, whether this is next week, a year from now, 2 years, etc. You'll always be able to hear this recommendation or this discussion and then go watch it if you haven't, or go read it, or go look at it, whatever. That's my hope. So with that in mind, I'm also still planning on bringing on guests. Currently, there's no one lined up, but I'd love to have some old friends or some new friends jump in on here and, discuss some cool stuff. We'll see. I'll have to ask some folks and see where they fall on that. Maybe if they're willing to come back or interested, could work something out. But for now, it's just going to be me. So with all that in mind, let's jump into the news roundup for this episode. I've actually got a crap ton of news to cover because it's obviously been a while since I've recorded one of these, and I'm not going to cover anything old. But not only has it been a while since I've recorded one of these, the last couple weeks have had a ton of news, big news, lots of happenings. Just as I'm sure everyone is aware, there's lots of stuff going on in the world right now. So there's a ton of news. First thing is that High Score Girl Season 2 dropped on Netflix. So if you were waiting for that, if you weren't watching that as it aired, either raw or otherwise, it is on Netflix now, and I highly recommend going to watch that. Now, High Score Girl is going to come back up a bit later because I'm going to talk about the manga. But the anime, the season 2 of the anime, is on Netflix now. If you haven't watched it, it's adorable, fun, and just really nostalgic overall. Dark Horse has licensed Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, which was my favorite show last season, basically. Masaki Yuasa's most recent TV series that he directed, at least. And Dark Horse licensed the manga. So this is something really, really exciting. And if you didn't watch the anime, or if you did, this is a really, really great manga and highly recommend it. I am dying to get my hands on this physical copy. I have it pre-ordered already. Just very excited. Speaking of Masaki Yuasa, he has retired as president of Science Saru, and Enyong Choi will be taking over. Now, she helped found the studio with him in the first place, so this is interesting, not super surprising, but what it does mean is that Masaki Yuasa is, I guess, getting out of the business side of things, we'll say. This doesn't mean he's going to stop directing or making anime. It just means he no longer is going to be running the company itself, or the studio, Science Saru. Now, that hopefully should free him up to focus more on actually making things. I know they have a new series coming out on Netflix, and, you know, they just did Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken, and a slew of really great movies that came out over the last couple of years, and they've just been like pumping shows out. So I imagine this should give them some breathing room, allow them to focus more on the creative side, and that's always good. We've got a couple announcements of series ending. So Konosuba, the light novel series, will be ending with its 17th volume. I, for one, love Konosuba, so it'll be sad to see it end, but personally I'm glad that series get to end properly, and 17's a lot of volumes, don't get me wrong, especially for like a light novel. It's not a lot for light novels, but it is a lot for a novel series, if that makes sense. But it's ending, and, you know, Yen Press will get around to releasing the English versions of it eventually, so that's something to look forward to. The Hinamatsuri manga is also ending with its 19th volume. That got an anime, a one-core adaptation, a couple seasons back, or a couple years, that was really fun, funny, cute, and overall just like very enjoyable to watch, a nice comedy. The manga will be ending, and I know we're getting releases of it in English as well, so look forward to that. Kind of continuing with our bad news segment, I guess, there's been a ton of things delayed, and delays kind of across the board for various things, various mediums, various series, and for obvious reasons. There is a big global pandemic going on, but one big one was Comiket 98 was canceled entirely. Obviously, the Olympics were postponed or canceled as well, so Comiket 98, which uses the same venue that the Olympics would have been, isn't able to reschedule during another season. You know, it's in limbo. So that's really unfortunate. I haven't actually been able to go to Comiket in a couple of years, and that's real sad because I used to really enjoy going, meeting or talking to some of my favorite artists. I got to meet Mizu Asato there, and that was really, really awesome. It's a really friendly, nice guy. And it sucks. Hopefully they'll be able to continue and reschedule it, and this won't hurt Comiket too bad. Next, we've got a couple different anime seasons that have either been delayed or just in limbo. Oregairu, or Snafu, however you want to call it. Season 3 was delayed. Sword Art Online, Alicization, War of the Underworld, was delayed. That was supposed to air at the end of this month and start a new season, but that's been pushed back. No Guns, No Life, Season 2 was pushed back. Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater, actually, that was this season. Started, I think it had a couple episodes already, and that's been pushed back and delayed after it started. The other ones were delayed before they started. We've also got a couple films that have been delayed. The Violet Evergarden film, the Princess Principal film, first of 6 as well. Happy Go Lucky Days, that film's been delayed. The Detective Conan film was delayed. Given's sequel film, also delayed. So, tons of anime seasons and films have been pushed back due to this whole thing. And I really don't think it's gonna be this isn't everything. More and more stuff are going to continue to be delayed and for longer periods of time. That's just the reality of things. And it sucks. So it's good that there's a ton of really good shows and manga and light novels that are already out there that I'm sure you haven't watched. There's plenty to do, but it does suck that a lot of this new stuff has been pushed back. Speaking of delays, pretty much all English manga or light novel publishers have delays. Yen Press, Kodansha, Seven Seas, Dark Horse, Square Enix, Soul Press, Tokyo Pop, they're still around. Tokyo Pop have all announced delays to their print lines. Viz is not delayed, and I don't believe J Novel Club is delayed. They're primarily digital anyway. I don't actually know if their physical will be delayed. I didn't see anything about it. Probably not then, but they're digital first, so digital will be perfectly fine. So that's it for all the negative delay news for now. There might be more coming out after this, but that's some of the big ones. So let's talk about the good news. What series are getting sequels that have been announced recently? And there's a lot of really cool ones here, and I'm really excited for them. So let's jump right in. My Hero Academia completely predictably gets its 5th season, and that's awesome. I'm really glad that the show is continuing. It's a behemoth. It's not surprising in the least, but I'm glad. It's good to get that confirmation now, and it's good that they're doing it by core so that each season they have enough time in between and enough production time to make them actually good. Tiger and Bunny is getting its 2nd season in 2022. Now, I know that's 2 years away, but Tiger and Bunny was such a fun show. A number of years ago, it was just so fun to watch, and I'm really, really glad it's getting a 2nd season. I never anticipated it would after all this time, but here we are. It is. What's interesting is that after the films that they made, I kind of thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe the popularity's dried up. But we're getting more. Awesome. Isekai Quartet announced its 3rd season, following the wrap-up of its 2nd season. And that series is just really funny. A great mix of characters that interact in really kind of entertaining, fun ways. And it really just gets a kick out of me. I enjoy it a lot. Excited to see the 3rd season. They're going to be adding in another new series to it. So they're really not a quartet anymore, but I guess no one's really counting. Magia Record, the Madoka spin-off, is getting a 2nd season, which is just deliciously ironic that Madoka is one and done if you don't count the films. Magia Record is getting a 2nd season, and they didn't even come close to wrapping up a single plot thread or storyline or character beat in the 1st season. It's totally unresolved, so it needed this, and I'm glad. I'm always happy to have more things set in that world, in that universe, in that style. Very excited. How Not to Summon a Demon Lord is getting a 2nd season in 2021, and this show surprised me in how much I actually enjoyed it. I thought it would just be garbage, to be totally frank. I thought it would be just awful, and a show that was all about the boobs, and it turned out it was definitely about the boobs, but there was an undercurrent of actual decent story, like storytelling for this, and that really surprised me. It seemed too good for a boob show. I don't know, maybe that's my prejudice in thinking that this kind of obviously fan service type show isn't going to be that great. But I really enjoyed the 1st season, enough that I picked up the light novels and started reading those, and picked up a light novel by the same author, Altina, which I'm not going to talk about this episode, but maybe a future one, that I do actually like a lot. I like the anime, so I really liked the light novel when I read it, and it's getting a second season. That's great news. Bofuri is also getting a second season, another light novel adaptation. This is not one I've read the novel for. It does not have an official English release yet, so I have not read the novel, and I loved the first season. It was so much fun. It was just so lighthearted, funny, enjoyable. So it's getting second season, and I couldn't be happier about that. Well, maybe I could if we got the light novel licensed and started releasing that. I'd really like that as well. Quick Sauce is getting a new TV anime series in 2020. I don't even remember what the most recent one was. I watched the first couple seasons or couple shows. I don't think I watched the last one. Maybe I'll get back to that. But Quick Sauce is getting a new TV series. For fans of that series, you're getting a new show pretty soon. Arya is getting a 15th anniversary film this winter. I kind of expect it's going to be delayed given all the things going on. But Arya is getting a film for the 15th anniversary. That's really exciting. The original TV show is a classic, and yeah, this is just really exciting. The manga too. But yeah, this is really exciting. Getting a film in winter. I think that wraps up everything that was announced recently, all the new sequels, all the delays, and that's going to do it for the news roundup. Went pretty long this time. I don't know how long each episode will go in general. This might have been a long one just because there's so much to talk about. Or not. I don't know. Maybe I'll go into more depth. Leave me a comment. Send me a message on Twitter. Let me know what you think. Should I talk more in depth about each of these things? Should I cover them in a little more detail? Or should I just do what I've done and talk about them a little bit and move on to the next thing? Let me know what you think. Speaking of letting me know what you think, the new spring anime season just started, so this is still kind of in the news section. I know I just said I was wrapping it up, but I'm kind of sort of not. But the new spring season just started, and there's a ton of new shows. I'm not going to talk about them all one by one here. No one's got that kind of time. There's tons of other really good resources for first impressions of all these shows, and you can get kind of a wider breadth from them. But I do want to hear from you. Like, what are you watching? What are you looking forward to? What's on your radar? What's not? What are you watching? So hit me up on Twitter. I am dokupied, and let me know. That definitely wraps up the news roundup for this episode. So I'm going to talk about a couple recommendations I have. Now, general spoiler warning going forward. I'm definitely not going to talk about any important plot stuff, but I don't, everyone has a different level of sensitivity towards spoilers. Mine is quite high. No, low. I don't mind spoilers. I don't think a lot of things are spoilers, so that kind of biases me towards thinking a lot of things are okay to talk about. In general, if I'm going to talk about something really important to the plot, like a twist or something important that happens, I'll give you a warning ahead of time. But largely, like previous episodes, the things I'm talking about are more broad strokes, less, character A dies or character B goes insane, and nothing like that. With that said, that's your spoiler warning. It won't be that long every time I do this, but there it is. So I'm going to start off with what I mentioned I already would, High Score Girl. I mentioned High Score Girl Season 2 was dropped on Netflix, and it aired on Japanese TV like 2 seasons ago, but who's counting Netflix? Oh wait, all of us. I cannot believe they do that every single time. It's so frustrating they don't simulcast anything. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that because I could do an entire episode about how frustrating Netflix's licensing nonsense is. Anyway, moving on. High Score Girl, the manga, is being released and published by Square Enix in English, and they released the first volume in February, and the second volume got delayed, but it's still coming out in April. Now I have the first volume, sitting on my shelf right there. I'm really excited for this. Like, I love the anime. The author, Rensuke Oshikiri, is really cool. They've done a couple of other series you may know that got adapted into TV. Pupipo. Don't know if that sounds familiar to you. I watched the anime a number of years ago. The current season is airing another of their shows. The House Spirit Tommy-chan, I think is the title. And obviously High School Girl. There's more written, a bunch of other manga series, and good ones too, but High School Girl is the one I'm talking about this time. The big thing that people are probably going to want to know, why is this worth reading after you've seen the show? For one, the obvious, the artwork. Rensuke Oshikiri has this really unique art style that I don't think the anime particularly is able to capture in its entirety. I think it does a decent job, but with the 3D CG, it's just not quite the same. And I'm a big fan of the creepy doll-like character designs of the original, and the art, I can kind of open the book here, has some even more and creepier and kind of darker tones than the TV series overall. It's kind of weirder, but in a way that makes it cuter. Like, it has that, creepy, cute vibe, and there's a lot more detail. 3D CG that the TV series uses just loses some of that character design and detail. Plus, there's more to the backgrounds, and there's something really to be said for the paneling and the way that the story flows and is structured in a manga that you don't get in an anime. The release, it's nice. Standard kind of paperback. No surprises here in terms of physical edition. If you liked the anime at all, the manga is 100% worth picking up and reading as well. Only volume 1's out, so it's not a big investment if you haven't read it. Volume 2 is coming out in April, and even then, not a big investment. I think volume 1 clocked in at $13 list price, and probably a little less on various stores. And it's from Square Enix. This is a new manga publishing division, I believe. I mean, they've been doing some manga, but I don't think I own any other Square Enix manga personally. But it's great. It's a good release. Highly recommend you checking it out. It opens up the possibility for more Rensuke Oshikiri manga series, and that I am definitely here for. In case you haven't watched the anime series, let me actually tell you about High Score Girl. I realized I never did. This series in general it's set in the 90s, and pretty much the show is about two main characters who are just super into arcades and fighting games. And I mean, this is the 90s, the golden age of fighting games and, small arcades in town. Set in Japan. It's all about that 90s arcade nostalgia. So if you, at any time, spent some time in an arcade, really loved old fighting games, you know the ones: Street Fighter, Tekken, King of Fighters, etc. They focus a lot on Street Fighter, especially in the first volume and early on. But as time goes on, and that's one really cool thing about this series, is that time does move forward. And as it moves forward, you get the new releases, you get the new consoles, you get the new, arcade machines, you get the new games, and it's really a big nostalgia trip for anyone who loves video games, anyone who liked arcades, and it really just takes you back to the 90s. The characters themselves are really endearing. You have your two main characters, Akira and Haruo, and Akira is, the quiet type, but she is awesome at fighting games. Haruo is kind of a typical 90s guy who hung out in arcades, really obsessed with winning and doing well, and competitive. Akira is really competitive herself too, but she doesn't really talk. That's kind of one character thing, is she doesn't have any dialogue. Everything she does is communicated entirely through action or gesture or punching harder, like that kind of thing. It's really impressive that she has so much character for someone who doesn't really say anything at all, that other characters react to. And that's why I think with the manga, you get a real sense of her character through the artwork, through her expressions, through the way she's depicted, the flow of scenes, things like that. But yeah, so those are your two main characters. It's just so nostalgic. There's a lot that goes on in this first volume. I forgot to actually play Golden Axe for a bit. That's really cool. But yeah, it's about these two characters who live in wildly different worlds and who only get to meet up and play fighting games or other games in arcades. That's where they interact, get to know each other, and just become closer, become more competitive, and really just become friends. And that's really what the series is. Later on, they throw in some romance. As they get older, they introduce an additional character who is also really great. They throw in a bit more of the romance angle. Early on, especially the first volume, it's just cute, fun, funny, nostalgic. In general, for any video game fan who played or grew up in the 90s, or maybe you're a video game fan now, you didn't grow up in the 90s, but you want to go back and kind of see what that was like. This is a really, really good window into that world, into the world of the 90s, of arcades in the 90s. And that's High Score Girl. You can pick it up anywhere you can buy manga. So I'm going to do one more recommendation, this time a light novel. I mentioned in my kind of 2020 update short episode that I've gotten significantly into light novels over the last couple of years, and I want the show to reflect that. So I'm going to talk about light novels. I'm going to start with something relevant, a little more relevant right now, something that I've really enjoyed, and I'm really glad I've been able to read this. That is Ascendance of a Bookworm by Miya Kazuki. Now, this name might sound familiar to you because it has an anime season. The second season is currently airing right now. I'm not going to talk about the anime too much, but the second season is airing now. The light novel, on the other hand, is published by J Novel Club. They're doing digital and print for this one, and they are up to 6 volumes in English. The 7th is due out in June, or it's simulpublished on their website. I'm a premium member, so I get to read the simulpublished chapters. I don't. I personally like to wait for the whole volumes to release, and then I'll read them. I'm not a big fan of short bursts of book content, but I am a premium member, so it's available, and the 7th volume is currently being simulpublished. So I'm just going to talk about the first 6. Now, this series is really popular in Japan, and there's a lot more volumes to come, but I'm only going to talk about what's available in English officially right now, which is the first 6 volumes. Now, the first 6 volumes are broken into parts. You have part 1 and part 2, which is not done. Part 1 is, and that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it just means that the series itself is broken into kind of overarching plots that they call parts. That is a terrible explanation for what it is, but the point is that the first set of volumes covers one particular storyline that leads into the next one, but the focus and overall structure kind of shifts a bit with each part. The first 6 volumes covers through kind of the content for the first 2 seasons of the anime. I'm pretty sure the anime will not get through volume 6, or it'll get to volume 6. Some of this, if you've watched the anime, you'll already know, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So this series is an isekai. I'll start off with that. It is an isekai, but it is totally unlike any of the other isekai that you're probably accustomed to unless you watch the show. Overall, there are There's no crazy abilities, powers. There's no harem. There's no one, overpowered hero who changes the world kind of thing. It's not that story. This story is about a frail, sick little girl who just loves her books. That's kind of really the base of it. Mine is the main character's name, dies, or her name is Urano, her original name, and she reincarnates as Mine in this new isekai world, and she reincarnates as a frail, sick, tiny, young girl. Poor, lives in the lower part of the city. She was not put into some, fancy noble lineage. She's not part of royalty. It's not that series, and that's really great. She is powerless, at least, up through most of this content. But overall, she is still a single character, and she's never going to be the OP nonsense that is throwing out fireballs and wrecking whole armies. It's not that. This series' overall plot is literally just she's poor in this world, and she is an absolute bookworm. She loves books. I don't know specifically that she actually likes any of the content she's reading. I don't think she cares too much. That's part of her character. She just likes books and likes to read. The act of reading and the physical act of having books. Now, as a book collector myself, I totally get it, but I'm also more interested in the content necessarily than the physicality. But hey, each bookworm is going to do their own bookworm. Her specific case of this, like I said, is just that now she's in this new world and she does not have access to books. So what does she do? Well, she sets out on a quest to find books, and if she can get books, she discovers that this world is, kind of medieval fantasy generally. So they are before the printing press, they're before all kinds of printing innovations. It's all still copied down by hand on dried animal skin, using parchment. It's that old school type of big leather bound fancy books, and she really doesn't have access to them because they cost a fortune. It's that kind of time period. So obviously, what does she try and do? Well, first she has to learn to read again. That might sound obvious, but in most of these shows, they glance over it and say, well, the character can read the script. It's cool. They have an auto-translation in their head. In this case, for some reason, the language is the same. There's some interesting language stuff that they do. It is technically a different language, but she speaks it. And so sometimes when she says words that don't exist or that aren't familiar to the other characters, they don't know what she just said. It's gibberish. But she does speak the same language. It's kind of weird. There's probably an explanation for that, but that's the setup. However, with the written language, completely unable to read it. So she has to learn how to read. Being from a poor family, no one in her family knows how to read. Her dad's a guard at the city wall. Her mom's a seamstress, I want to say. She's either a seamstress or a dyer, like works and dyes cloth. I can't remember exactly which one it is. Probably a seamstress. Not really important. But the point is, poor family in the medieval time, they know how to read numbers, and that's it, at most. And her father can maybe read his own name, or write his own name. So she sets out to, learn how to read. And that's kind of where they start you. I mean, she's such a weak, frail, sickly young girl in this new world that just walking is hard for her. Just walking out and being out is hard. She gets sick immediately. And that's kind of what she deals with for the first couple of volumes, is learning to read, getting to know the characters, trying different ways to create books, to create something analogous to a book, something that she can read. And she goes through a ton of different ideas and prototypes, clay tablets, Mokon. She does, what else does she do? She tries to do papyrus? Boy, do I not know how to say that. But she goes through a number of different ideas, concepts, and things happen. I'm not going to get too deep into it. She moves forward, and through the first 6 volumes at least, she progresses in her goal to make books for herself to read. And they introduce a bunch of additional characters. There's a lot of really cool plot things that happen that, unlike most isekai, this series is very ground level. It's methodical, it's slow. The characters are fleshed out. There's no hand-waving of abilities. They're never going to be the type that pretends this is like an RPG and, oh, I leveled up, or, oh, I have a status screen, or a menu, or spells and ability. Like, it's not that at all. Now, this world does have magic, but it's not what you're thinking. She doesn't discover that for a long while in this series, because in this world, magic is generally only available to nobility. It's a whole part of the setup, which is actually an important plot point where, since magic is only available to the nobility, she gets dragged into some plot developments related to that. Again, not going to get into it, but just suffice to say that this is not your average isekai. One thing that mine does do is she does rely on her previous world knowledge quite heavily. In particular, products that she kind of recreates to ease her kind of poor daily life. So to make things easier, she makes like a simple shampoo. She reinvents the method of making wax candles or fat candles not be disgustingly stinky. She makes hairpins. So things like that. She tries to make her life a little easier, in a poor family. Through that, she gains connections to a merchant, Benno. That kind of snowballs and is how she's able to earn money and work towards her goal of creating books. Then she gets involved with the church for various reasons related to magic. There she meets the high priest, or Ferdinand. He becomes another vital, important character to her. I won't get too deep into any of this. The point being that there's some really multifaceted, interesting characters that they introduce. Lutz, you initially don't think anything of him, really. At least I didn't. And he becomes such like a pivotal, central character for her. Their relationship is just really wholesome, heartwarming, and it's really great how they come to rely on each other and the way they build up trust and get to know each other. There's some inspiring bit of character writing that this author does, and it's something you don't necessarily see writing or character development this well done for isekai, especially in a light novel series. A couple other things of note for this series: they have additional perspective chapters, typically at the end of a volume, and they'll cover other characters, either perspective of an event or a discussion, or they'll follow the other characters doing other things, talking with characters outside of Mine's perspective. The main story is all written from Mine's perspective. She is both the, at times, narrator and the main perspective that you follow. So it's really cool to get to see these like side chapters where you follow other characters. There's one with Tuli, her sister, or Benno, the merchant, or Ferdinand, the high priest. So there's a number of like all perspective chapters that I really look forward to reading each time, because it's an insight into how the other characters see Mine and the situation, and I think it really helps flesh the world out. They really meticulously do a lot of world building. The world building is slow and methodical, and you learn what you need to when you need to, and they don't bombard you with a ton of exposition. You'll get to it, and that's kind of the point. It's all in due time. You will learn about the world and the greater kind of situation that Mine is in. At the very beginning, she is a sick, poor girl who really doesn't get to leave her apartment. Like that's it. Her world is tiny, and so that's all you learn. Like I said, she doesn't learn about the existence of magic or monsters until way down the line. She, as a character, takes a long time to learn these things. She doesn't see a map of where she is until a little further into the story. She doesn't learn, the name of the country she's in, the name of the lord of the actual region or city she's in. There's so much she doesn't know, but that's what the series really does well, is build all that up bit by bit. But I think I've rambled on enough. So if you're interested, check out Ascendance of a Bookworm by Miya Kazuki. It's published by J Novel Club, so you can buy it kind of anywhere digital ebooks are available or on their site. I recommend just going straight to their site and buying it or becoming a member there. You can buy credits that are cheaper than buying the volume outright on other platforms. So it saves you a little bit of money, and you'll get a premium ebook version, which sometimes has, extras. Definitely recommend it. It's a really great series. 6 volumes out now, 7th in June, like I said. If you haven't seen the anime series, or if you have, the light novel has so much more detail than the anime that it's absolutely worth reading from the start. So even if you are a fan of the anime and you're watching the 2nd season now, I still recommend going back and reading from volume 1. Don't skip anything. There's a lot of really good additional information, dialogue, and character moments, and world building that gets glossed over in the anime. Not to say I dislike the anime in any way. I think it's done a really great job. But, it's a light novel being adapted into an anime. They have to cut something. So that's it for my 2 recommendations for this week. High Score Girl by Rensuke Oshikiri and Ascendance of a Bookworm by Miya Kazuki. That's also it for this episode. I know I've rambled on for quite a long time, but there was a lot to talk about in the first episode back in a long time. So thank you for listening. Follow my Twitter for updates. I am DocPay. Feel free to comment. Let me know what you think about the new format. If you want to talk about the spring anime season, I'll gladly talk about it there. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I have the podcast uploaded and available absolutely everywhere now. So please subscribe and leave a review. Let me know what you think about the show. And that's it for me this week. I'll catch you next time.